right, hello. Okay, I had to have a really catchy title for this, which is why it is Rethinking Data in the Age of AI. Better tools, worse decisions? I don't know. We will find out. So, as I said, I'm Amanda. I'm here. I run one of our product groups over here at Snowflake. I was the co-founder of Streamlit. I work a lot with data. I work a lot with data scientists. And data is hard, right? And because data is hard, we have stopped being curious about a lot of things, right? We're like, oh, we'd love to have these things. We would love to have them together. I would love to ship this feature. I would love to do this thing. But it's been so costly, right, that we just don't, right? And AI has the chance to change this in so many ways, to make so many things cheaper, right? To build all the bar graphs we've ever wanted, right? You know, to automate the data pipelines, to do these things. We are already living in this age of abundance. Right? I see how fast some of my engineers can ship PRs right now. People can ship PRs who have never done it before. And it's starting to help us dream bigger. And I used to give a version of this slide, like even a year ago, if you've ever been to one of my other talks. I used to give this especially in Streamlit, because one of the things that Streamlit did was make it really, really fast to build apps. And all we changed in some ways was just making it fast. But when you make it fast, right, you fundamentally change the ROI, right, of what you can do. And it used to be, right, again, because all of these things were so costly, right? Your marketing teams, your sales teams, they stopped asking you questions about the data. Even yourselves, right, in your tools. You're like, it's going to take 6 weeks. I'm going to have to call somebody else to do this, right? I don't want to do that, right? We learned to live without. And this is starting to change. We're starting to flip this, where we're starting to be able to get insights, do things that we never thought that we could before, right? Most companies that I talk to these days, it's really just about what the heck should I be doing with AI? There's so much potential, right? Where do I focus, right? What do I do? And a lot of the things that held us back, right, again, that made it costly, right, are changing. And we're going to be able to skip steps. Right? A lot of what we see AI doing, especially for our developers, for our data sciences, is just these things that took a while before, right, we're able to automate them. We're able to move fast. And there's probably a lot of companies here today that are pitching you on these very things, right? We use Cursor in my team, right? It's producing a lot of our code. It's generating the testing frameworks for us, right? There's a lot of things that I think, we're going to be doing at Snowflake and other places that allow you to generate the pipelines that are going to help you find the data. All these things that have really just kind of held you back, made a project take 8 hours or 8 weeks or 8 months, right? We're going to start happening a lot faster. And so that's great. It's not all going to happen tomorrow, right? Some of this is going to take time, but a lot of this is going to happen, if not in the next month and in the next couple of years. And so we're going to get everything we ever wanted and more. It's going to be great. How can it not be great to live in the age of abundance? This is my daughter when she got all the yogurt that she ever wanted in the world, and actually she was quite happy with it. But we know that there's a lot of problems, right? A lot of people have come and they will talk to you, people who are much smarter than I, who build these models, who understand, and they can tell you what's happening with hallucinations, black box errors, model bias, modest drift. I'm not going to talk about any of that today, right? These are very real problems, right? LLMs are basically built to hallucinate. That is what they do, right? A lot of what we do when we build technology around it is trying to build guardrails, right, around those hallucinations. And a lot of it's getting a lot better, right? You can see it with every model that comes out. A year and a half ago, 2 years ago, when we were thinking, everybody was like, I got to build my own foundation model, right? I got to super train it to do these things, right? The new models that are coming out, the open source models, are doing so much more, even in like a year, than we ever thought they were going to do. Some of these problems, they're going to be solved, right? We're going to figure out how to do these types of things. And so then that gets us to, well, as a data team, let's assume, right? It's not all going to be fixed. It's not all going to be great. But let's assume we get a lot of what we ever wanted. All the new data is coming in, right? Great. We've got the data. It's able to produce code, right? Our pipelines are running, right? We've got these things. What's going to happen? Well, there's generally 4 basic errors, right, that you tend to make when you're a data team. One can be implementation error, right? The amount of time sometimes that I look at things and then we just don't have the data, we instrumented it wrong, right? We collected the wrong thing, right? We made something up. There's a lot of times I look at, a graph and it fell off the cliff and, it's our telemetry that messed up, right? Some of this is very hard, but I think a lot of this instrumentation area, especially the human error that we make in instrumentation, right? The models the AI are going to be able to help us with. So, not going to talk about that. Other people can talk about that. Same with calculation error, right? There's a lot of things, basic math, basic coding things that sometimes people get wrong. They calculated the metric wrong. Metric definitions are hard, right? But a lot of that calculation, that math, right? Those are things that are easier for AI. If we do it right, we can solve that error. But there's the analysis and the decision tend to be very human things. They are things that are very specific to your company, very specific to your industry and your point in time. And I am worried, if we do not do this well, that this is where we're going to skip too many steps. And data teams and companies are going to waste a lot of time and a lot of money. So let's look at a few super basic examples, right? Let's say I ask, please generate a chart. Maybe I ask one of my analysts today. Maybe I ask an agent in the future. Great. Plot the sales across the year. What are we doing? I need to know this for my startup. I'm going to a board meeting. I need to make a decision. Maybe we can forecast on this. What does it mean? What do we think that the things are going to be in January? How should I set my sales targets, right? A lot of things that we can do from this, right? But a lot of times, even our best data analysts may make a bad inference. So in this case, I generated this data, and I said, show me where we're growing, but we drop off a cliff at month 5 and month 6. Every single cohort is going to fail, right? Maybe we poured in a bunch of marketing money, but our product is bad, right? Maybe we're doing product-led growth, but there's something that's causing them to churn at month 5 or month 6 because we don't have some feature that they need. I don't know what it is, right? But this is the type of analysis error that I see people make all of the time, right? Because you're not segmenting correctly. You're not looking at it. You don't deeply understand your data, your customers. And when you start to extrapolate this out and go to people who don't maybe understand that, we gave this directly, right, via an agent to someone, they don't understand what they're looking at, what questions to ask, right? These are the types of errors that even if you got the analysis, the ultimate part right, you can get the analysis, you can get the decision wrong. If you'd only looked at that first chart, right, you may have made a very different decision about who you need to hire, where you need to put your marketing spend, what you need to do than if you looked at this second chart, right? And it is surprising how many meetings I go to with very smart people who still, in many cases, do not understand the difference between correlation and causation, right? I can't say I always get it right, but we all know ice cream causes murder. There's many, many reasons. People get hopped up on sugar. They start stabbing people in the state of New York. This is obviously what is going on. We need to cut ice cream sales, right? Obviously, I'm joking. But these are things, again, where even when you get it right, data's right, the data's clean, the implementation's fine, the math is good, right? We plotted it right, we picked some good colors, right? We ultimately are making the wrong decision, right? Because we do not understand what we're doing with the data. Right? Second example. This is a very real and actually very painful example for me personally. Every quarter, I get a chart like this. Here's how people are rated in your org. We would like you to have fewer people who are rated exceptional. You're only supposed to have 10% putting on this bucket or whatever things, right? I have occasionally, on days without enough caffeine, gone to a whiteboard and tried to explain why you cannot expect a natural distribution if you are not grading on a curve, but you are grading to a standard. Right? If I hired a bunch of 4-minute milers, we would expect that there would be a natural curve of their finish times. We would also expect, if what we asked them to do was run 4-minute miles, that they would all hit 4-minute miles, in which case, right, they are exceptional, right? They should all be in that bucket. But the other problem is we're not looking at the right data, right? And this happens all the frickin' time. If I did my job, even if we're grading on a curve, and I fired the people that I was supposed to fire, then you would expect fewer people in the poor and okay bucket because I did a great frickin' job. I got those people out. Right, but we have not included that data set, so we do not know if I actually did my job as a manager. Also, we should expect, based on how things go, that this is not a fluid hiring pipeline. Right? We have things that happen at a time. I might have hired a large batch of people 2 years ago, and then I did not hire people for a year. If they have been enrolled 2 years and we're grading to a standard, right, we should expect them, right, to have advanced within that time and not all be in the central bucket. Right? You cannot expect a natural distribution unless we have a natural hiring distribution. So you need to look at where they are on the curve. Marketing still refuses, sorry, not marketing, HR still refuses to give me this chart. But this is an example, right? You could make very bad decisions. If you just look at this first chart, you would tell me, cut some of these people, right? Maybe in the exceptional bucket, right? Move them down, right? I'm going to risk losing potentially some of my very good people, right? Because we did not fundamentally understand the data. Maybe we're going to fire me as a manager, right? Because I'm not doing my job well, right? All right, here's another example. Let's say you got the data right, completely right? Maybe even analysis is right. You can tell the absolute wrong story with a chart, right? There is an art to presenting data in the right way, right? A bar chart, a pie chart, a line chart of the exact same data can tell a very different story. One of the things that we need to be thinking about, right, is how do we standardize not just the data, but the chart and the way that we visualize this, the story that we're telling. This product of mine looks terrible, right? It's completely flat. Should we invest in it? Should we put the money in another product line? Right? Well, if we look at it in a completely different axis, right? Now what do we think? Should we invest in this product? Right? We also start to see things. You can very clearly see now some of the seasonality, right, that's happening, right? The time length that we should be looking at. Again, if you do not ask the right question, if you do not understand the data, if you do not understand the business, you are not going to make the right decision. You can look it up online. There's a lot of ways that you can do very bad charting. Right? We can build some of these in. We can make these better as companies and agents. But if you do not understand this, you will not make the right decision. You will guide the company in the right way. Let's assume we got it all right. We charted it. We picked great colors. We asked the right question. We put things in, right? Now we've got this. This was a chart. Again, it's representing somewhat real thing that we looked at with one product line that I work on. We're trying to migrate one from A to B. Common thing that we do. We're looking at how that's trending over time. Anyone want to guess what we spent 30 minutes discussing when we looked at the migration and what we were doing with this? Why doesn't the line go all the way to 100%? Why are we missing maybe 2% of the data? We said, well, it's because of this reason. We have these types of accounts, these service accounts. Are we absolutely sure? Over and over, right? And on the end of the day, it does not freaking matter. I guarantee you, I would bet my entire freaking paycheck that we are not going to make an extra single dollar from getting the telemetry or getting any of those people right on this product. All of the money is going to come from the first people who migrated over, right? Who love our freaking product, and we just need to figure out how to double that. Right? But sure, I can hire 2 people to try to track down and make that line equal 100% because it's going to make us feel better. Sure. Maybe 1 out of 100 times, sometimes that might give an insight. I guarantee you we're not going to do anything with that, right? But I don't even want to calculate, right, the cost of the people sitting in that room with VP titles, right, and the amount of time we spent on that. And just think about the promise of social media 20 years ago. Right? We were going to connect with all of our friends that we left off in high school. It was going to be amazing. We're going to form meetups. There are a lot of great things that happen on social media. And yet, what does most of the thing happen? Mostly we spend 143 minutes a day as adults scrolling posts, looking at what people made for lunch, what's trending on TikTok, what college students are putting into their rooms in sorority week now, right? A lot of freaking wasteless things that do not move the needle for our lives. And this is the potential future for a lot of us. In data. It's already the life for a lot of us when you think about the number of dashboards you look and you scan and you learn absolutely freaking nothing. And even if you do, you don't change your mind as a company, right? You don't do anything about it, right? And it's because we do not fundamentally understand in most companies how we make decisions. We do not understand what drives the needle, right, and what we need to do, and so we spend a lot of time spinning around. And imagine what's going to happen when you have agents at your fingertips that can tell you anything. It can tell you all the questions. We can spend a lot of time feeling really good about all the data that we looked at and actually still make the wrong decisions or no decisions at all. All right, that was a lot of doom and gloom, but there is a huge amount of potential here. Again, back to the original point, we have dropped the cost of what does this mean, right? So basic economics, what does it mean when you drop the cost of something, right? We're shifting the curve. We're shifting the optimal point here when you look at the ROI to do a lot of these analysis. That means a lot of very good things if we do it right. Right now we're shifting up on the benefit curve. All the things, again, that we wanted before, some of the really real insights and tools and things that we needed, right, we're going to be able to get. But there's also a risk, right, that we're just chasing benefits that aren't there. That benefit curve maybe actually even goes down if we overwhelm people with too much data, right, in terms of what they do. And so that's the real challenge for us as data teams, as data professionals and leaders, is to think about, as we drop the cost down, how do we ensure we are getting that ROI? How do we think about shifting the benefit curve, right? How are we going to guardrail these mistakes, right, on our teams so that we get that benefit? This is a real conversation, modulo, some things I obscured a bit, that I had with one of our lead data scientists, one of my favorite people in the world. His name is Tyler Richards. He's here. There's a bunch of other people in this conversation too. I made them all one data scientist. Andre, Rehan, other Tyler, I see you if you're here. But what I want to point out, you don't have to read all of this, is I'm a pretty savvy person. I know my product really well. I know our data really well. I know the difference between correlation and causation. And yet, I want you to just see how many back and forths it took me with Tyler to get to the actual right question that we wanted to ask about this product. And if Tyler had just given me the answer on the first one, I actually probably wouldn't have done anything. I think I would have ingested it and we probably would have gone and done the exact same product roadmap. But Tyler, because he very deeply understands data, he understands our product and everything else, right? And a couple other people in the conversation were able to guide to what was the ultimate thing. What am I actually trying to do? What am I trying to do? I'm trying to make this product more successful. I'm trying to get more people to adopt it. He was able to guide and figure out the actual right question that we want to do. And I think this is a key skill set that most good data teams have. And that's the skill set that we have to think about moving. I surveyed a lot of those people I just mentioned, and I said, what do you think actually data teams are going to look like in the future? Don't worry, you don't have to read this. I'll summarize it for you. The first, you want to go back? Somebody want to take a picture? There you go, you can take a picture. Wise insights that are not mine. I completely cribbed. Here's what it kind of basically says. They're saying, I think we're going to have to think more about designing the problems and the solutions. If I don't have to code or whatever, this is where I'm going to spend my time. I think what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to spend a lot of time with my stakeholders helping them understand how to be better at data, right? I think we're going to need to spend a lot of time more thinking about how we use AI. What does it mean to bring it into our processes, right? And all to use these capable answers to answer bigger and better questions, right? But we should become problem designers, right? Even before we become solution designers, right? That is the big benefit that we can start to add. And it's only going to work well, right, if we actually do design this good culture around data, right? Many of you have probably heard the term data, culture eats strategy for breakfast. I'm adding and data to that. If you have a trash decision-making culture in your company, you're going to make trash decisions. I don't care how you use AI or data, right? Trash in, trash out. We have to change, we have to up-level, we have to understand how we are making these decisions, why we are making the decisions. This is actually where agents can actually be a huge help to us. If you can start to articulate how you use data in your company, what actually changed the decision, right? How you want to use that, you can actually use agents to do that. One great way to use agents, and I see a lot of really smartest people I know who are using agents, they design them and they say, I want to give you a use case. All I want you to do is basically ask me questions back. Sometimes I only want you to ask me yes or no questions. It's about refining our thinking, right? That thing that Tyler did for me, that's a thing agents can do for us. We can help them have us design hypotheses. We can help them design experiments. We're obsessed, I think, with the industry, and I'm obsessed too, because it makes a great demo with these zero-shot answers, right? I asked you, you gave me back the exact insight that I need to go drive my sales. It's elusive. You can't go to your best data scientists in the company right now and get a zero-shot answer from them. It's a process. And so what we need to embrace is we need to embrace that process. We need to understand first how it works, and then we can use agents to guide us toward that and guide others toward it. What I do as a product manager a lot of times is just sitting with our customers. What's your problem, sir? Right? What are the things that are blocking you today? Why is that a problem? Right? Where are you wasting time? What do you wish it looked like? An agent can do that job, right? And it can do it in a very useful way to start to extract. How are salespeople making decisions about what customer to go to today? How is your CFO, right, making a decision about what to invest in, right? These are things that we can start to ingest as data too. And if we can help that, if we can use agents, if we can use ourselves as data teams as the people who hopefully understand the difference between correlation and causation, right, to train these agents to help us think critically, right, to think about our decision-making process, then that is what is ultimately going to help us move faster. And that's ultimately what's going to help us accelerate as a company. So if you take something away today, agents, there's a lot of things you can do to here, but think about deeply how you're making decisions. Think about the best decision that you made recently, the best analysis. Try to articulate that process. Try to circulate that. Try to understand what's happening, right? The reason that things like Cursor, right, Windsurf, all the amazing coding things are taking off so well in software engineering is because software engineering has great processes. Right? You are using it as an assistant. If you as a company would let an intern push code to production that could bring it down, you have bigger problems than using AI. That doesn't happen because the best software engineering, most of the world, right, does software engineering in a way where you can check the code in, there is tests against it, people review that PR, right, you monitor it and things. We don't do that for a lot of our decision making and our data. And that's the challenge that we have. If we can create the system, AI can help us. If we can't create the system, we're going to waste a lot of freaking time. All right, that's all I have.